Hello and welcome to Passing the Torch. Today we're continuing a set of shorter lessons that I've been calling Bible Bites that make you go, Today's part 10 of this series of who knows how long it'll be. And today we're talking about silent prayers. From what I have seen in the Bible, I've really only found 3 prayers in the Bible that are identifiably silent. All the others, you can't, either they're obviously out loud or you can't tell. So what are these 3 prayers? There's Abraham's servant's prayer when he goes back to find Isaac a wife. There's Hannah's prayer when she's praying for a child, who is Samuel. And Nehemiah's prayer when he's praying for Jerusalem. So let's get into this just a little bit more to see what these prayers were about. Abraham's servant's prayer. Abraham had sent one of his main servants back to Mesopotamia to find a wife for his son Isaac. He did not want a wife for Isaac from the land of Canaan because the land of Canaan was filled with very evil people at this time. Not that Mesopotamia wasn't that much better, but this is what God had, or what Abraham had told his servant. So let's pick up this story as the servant is talking to Rebekah's father. So if you remember, Rebekah wound up being the wife that married Isaac. So he's found Rebekah. He's been invited to her father's house, and they're sitting around the table, and he's talking to him and telling him the story. So we're picking up this at Genesis chapter 24, starting at verse 34. So he, that's the servant, said, "I am Abraham's servant." And I'm skipping some pieces in this just to shorten it. "Now my master made me swear, saying, 'You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell, but you shall go to my father's house and to my family, and take a wife for my son.' And this day I came to the well and said, 'O Lord, God of my master Abraham, if you will now prosper the way in which I go.' But before I had finished speaking in my heart," how do we know it was silent? Because of the way he refers to it. "Before I had finished speaking in my heart, there was Rebekah coming out with her pitcher on her shoulder, and she went down to the well and drew water. Then I asked her and said, 'Whose daughter are you?' And she said, 'The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him.'" Listen to this. So talking about cultural references, right? "So I put the nose ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists." Bracelets, big fat hairy deal. Nose ring, all right. But it's come back after all these several thousand years. Then there's Hannah's prayer. And I encourage you to read all of 1 Samuel chapters 1 and 2, actually the whole Bible, but this is a great story there. And so we're going to skip part of that story, which you really ought to go back and read. Hannah was married, but she was barren. She couldn't have children, she did not have children. But she desired a child so much. And so we're going to pick up this story when she was in Shiloh. That's where the tabernacle was at the time. Remember, the tabernacle was the portable temple that they had in the wilderness. Well, they hadn't built Solomon's temple at this point. This was before Solomon. And so the tabernacle was in Shiloh. She was there at the tabernacle and she was praying. So let's look at her earnest prayer. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, we're going to pick it up at verse 9. "So Hannah arose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat by the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed to the Lord, and wept in anguish. And it happened, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah spoke in her heart, but only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. She was praying silently. Therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, 'How long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you.' And Hannah answered and said, 'No, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition, which you have asked of him. And she said, Let your maidservant find favor in your sight. So the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. My wife has held on to that verse for so many years, not for the same reasons, but when she's standing in faith, she holds on to that, but she does it in the King James. Her face was no longer downcast. If you're believing for something, and as Hebrews 11:24 says, you believe that you receive when you pray, why should your face be downcast? Because you believe you've already received it, whether you see it or not. All right, and that's what Hannah did. She believed she received when she prayed silently. So the last one, I forgot this last verse. So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked for him from the Lord. Samuel means asked of God. Then we go to Nehemiah's prayer. So Nehemiah was cupbearer to King Artaxerxes of Persia. Cupbearer, that means he was the wine taster, which means the king trusted him implicitly. Nehemiah in the previous chapter had heard of the plight of the people back in Jerusalem. They are being attacked, etc., etc., because the walls have fallen down. Now, before we read this, you need to understand that if you appeared back then in Persia, if you appeared sad in front of the king, that was punishable by death if the king desired to do so. If he was having a bad hair day, well, off with his head. So let's see what this story says. So we're starting in Nehemiah chapter 2, starting at verse 1. And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had never been sad in his presence before. Therefore the king said to me, Why is your face sad, since you are not sick? This is nothing but sorrowful of heart. Then I became dreadfully afraid, because he understood that it was punishable by death, right? And said to the king, Nehemiah said to the king, May the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire? Then the king said to me, What do you request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. Now, think of this. Do you think that he's in front of the king and he's going to pray out loud, Dear Father, which art in heaven? No, this is a silent prayer. And I said to the king, If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. That's what the whole book of Jeremiah or Nehemiah is about. And I encourage you to read it. It's a pretty cool story. Now, the fact that no other obviously silent prayers exist in the Bible, or are recorded rather, how should we be praying if we're alone? Just something for you to think about. And with that, that's Bible Bites that make you go, We'll see you next time on Passing the Torch. So long.